Hello, this is lecture 4 from chapter 5 on Introduction to Macroeconomics. In this lecture, which might be broken up into two parts, we're going to talk about Keynesian economics. Now before we do that, we have to talk a bit about the Great Depression, because it was the Great Depression that brought in Keynesian economics. And actually the Great Depression did two things that still exist today. One was to create a new school of economic thought known as Keynesian economics. And now in macroeconomics, you have two schools of thought. You have classical and you have Keynesian. And the second thing the Great Depression did was pretty much change forever how the American public looked toward their government in terms of helping the economy. Prior to the Great Depression, it was thought that the government should stay out laissez-faire, and therefore people running for Congress, for the presidency, really did not talk about the economy because it was not the job of the government to get involved in the economy. Ever since the Great Depression, the American voters have looked toward government and the politicians to do something about the economy if the economy is not doing well. And so the Great Depression created a problem for classical economics. First of all, remember, classical economics said that long downturns could not happen. Well, this was a long downturn. It started in 1929 and it continued throughout the 1930s and pretty much did not end until the Second World War. So it was happening when it should not be happening, and it was not temporary, it was long-lasting. In fact, we have a quote here from President Hoover at the time. "While the crash only took place 6 months ago, I am convinced we now have passed the worst, and with continued unity of effort, we shall rapidly recover. There is one certainty of the future of a people, of the resources, intelligence, and character of the people and the United States: prosperity." So prosperity is just around the corner, and that was said time and time again by Hoover and other politicians at the time, but not over. Things just got worse and worse and worse, and lasted again the whole decade of the 1930s. And even worse for classical economics, the economy was making all the necessary adjustments. So wages were coming down during the Great Depression, prices were coming down. Didn't talk about prices too much earlier, but prices decreasing was part of the solution in that it would get people to buy more things. And so the wages coming down was supposed to get workers their jobs back. Prices coming down was supposed to bring customers back to the stores. And interest rates coming down was supposed to get that money that was being saved to be borrowed and spent. So these things were happening, but the economy was not self-correcting. Things were not turning around. And here's some numbers. Can you focus there? Okay, that's good. So we have here some numbers during the cycle of the 1930s. It was a peak in 29, a trough in 33, and then we had an expansion from 33 to 37. Even though it was an expansion, according to the definition of an expansion, it was still a pretty bad time for most Americans. What we have here is a thing called gross national product. This was the measurement back then. We now have gross domestic product. They are quite similar. We'll talk about the differences in Chapter 6. But at that time, pretty much your gross national product was the same as your gross domestic product. And these are measured at $1939, so they are adjusted for inflation. And so we had $85.9 billion in the peak of 29 before things went sour. The economy collapsed to $61.5 billion, and then it recovered to 37. But based on the growing population at the time, it was not that much of a recovery. Investment went from almost $15 billion down to $1 billion. Investment dried up, and that's one of the problems, according to Keynes, with the market-based economy of capitalism, and that is that investment can pretty much plummet to almost nothing in a short period of time. And even at the peak of the peak of 37. Again, it was still quite far below what it was in 29. Consumption also collapsed, down from $8 billion down to 3.8, or over 50% collapse. It came back a bit to 37, but still way below where it was. Unemployed persons went from 1.55 million to 12.83 million. And at the peak, got back to 9.48, still way above where it was in 29. Unemployment was a very good 3.15% in 29. It was a terrible, almost 25% in 33, and still a terrible 17% in 37. So there was a recovery, but I would not call that a recovery where most Americans felt the economy was doing well. And here we see that things were actually making the adjustments that we talked about. These are a measurement of wages. They were coming down. CPI is the Consumer Price Index. That's a measurement of prices. They were coming down. Interest rates that came down quite a bit, and yet the economy was not improving. So things were going according to plan in terms of wages coming down, prices coming down, interest rates coming down. But again, the economy was still at a stagnant 17% unemployment rate in 37. After 37, the economy went back down into another recession where unemployment rate increased, and the whole thing really did not end until the Second World War came about. So classical economics simply cannot explain what was happening. And the classical economists of the day were of no help in offering a path out of the long-term economic slump, except to say, wait, and let things run their course. And so their only solution to an economic slump was simply do nothing. Again, laissez-faire, the government should stay out and let the economy self-correct, but the economy was not self-correcting. And so a new economic school of thought came to be developed during this time period, and that came from John Maynard Keynes from Great Britain. He was a British economist, and he was causing quite a disturbance because he was questioning, first of all, mainstream classical economics. And then he also offered a new theory, not just to explain what was happening, but to present a solution. He had a solution to get us out of the Great Depression. And he published his books. He published a book in 1936 where he presented his ideas, and it was called The General Theory on Employment, Interest, and Money. So Keynes had no problem with Adam Smith's micro-world of self-interest and markets allocating resources effectively. He understood the importance of free market economics. Some people argue that Keynes was a socialist. He was not a socialist. He believed in private enterprise. He believed in the government staying out of the markets and let the markets decide what we're going to produce, how we're going to produce, and for whom. He felt the problem with capitalism was that at the macro level, it was inherently unstable at the macro level. He talked about it's unstable due to quick and large changes in confidence and expectations that cause quick and large changes in consumer spending and business investment. And we've seen that recently as well with the current economic slump that we're in right now. Business investment has pretty much disappeared right now. No one, especially for small businesses, people are not getting into the restaurant business right now, and they're not getting into small strip malls. The small business community is just devastated right now. So Keynes talked about a term called animal spirits, and he said this is what really drives the economy. And this is a quote from his book. Most probably of our decisions to do something positive, the full consequences of which will be drawn out over many days to come, can only be taken as a result of animal spirits, of a spontaneous urge to action rather than inaction, and not just as the outcome of a weighted average of quantitative benefits multiplied by quantitative probabilities. So what he's talking about is even though we make crunch numbers in terms of business sales, business investment, things like that, the decisions are not really made by these numbers, they're made by people. And the people in charge of corporations, in charge of small businesses, they're the ones who have to decide whether or not to buy that new piece of land, to expand your business, to borrow money, to go out there and invest in your own business. That takes animal spirits. Urge to action. And so if you feel the economy is going to be doing well, you think sales are going to be great, you go out there and you invest, and by doing that, you're going to drive the economy upward as investment leads to job creation, more spending, and the economy can prosper. But if you're worried about the economy, you're worried about sales, then you have inaction. You don't do that investment. you don't take that new project. You don't hire those new people. And therefore the economy does not have that economic boom, and the economy tends to stagnate, simply based on expectations, simply based on a lack of confidence. So if people worried about the economy, they do not take action, they do not buy land and or invest, and the economy is hurt by this inaction. And that can turn on a dime. Again, investment can dry up overnight. Business does not have to invest right now, and therefore that can plummet. Consumers, especially on what are called durable goods, goods that are meant to last 3 years or more, we can cut back on our consumption on those right now. And so new car sales, new appliance sales, all those things can plummet almost down to zero. So what I'll do is I'll stop there. This will be part 1.